All right. Welcome to Brand or Die. I am your host, Steve Reed, and today I'm doing my first live episode. So I've invited people just on social media. I don't know if anyone's going to show up to this. My channel's still really small. There's not a lot of subscribers, not really like a ton of views or anything, but I wanted to give this a shot, mostly just for the sake of experimenting with the format and whatnot. Oh, hey Lauren, how's it going? So we had somebody show up. That's promising. So, but anyway, this episode today is going to be about brand personality archetypes, and since this is the first version of doing this, I haven't really experimented with a lot of the different software for being able to share my screen and everything. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to share my screen. There are some cool things that I would like to share, but unfortunately, you're gonna have to use your imagination today. But it's okay. We can discuss the concepts and what they mean and how to use them. And I think there's going to be a lot of value here. So first off, just last night I was talking to an associate about my business and how I got started doing different things, and what, geez. So there's a little lesson for you. Turn on Do Not Disturb. All of a sudden, everyone's sending me messages. So anyway, we're sitting having this conversation, and we're both talking about what we did for a living, and he was asking me about what I do. And sometimes when I try to explain people that I build brand architectures for businesses and I'm helping businesses connect with customers, they look at me a little cross-eyed. They're not totally sure what that entails. And so I gave him a little breakdown of it, but more importantly, I told him about some of the experiences that led me to realize that this was something important that I wanted to pursue. And when I first got started, I was spending all of my time just designing really cool stuff for my clients. They'd come to me and say, "Steve, I want something really cool. I need I need a logo. I need a website. I need all these things." And so I would sit there, I'd put on my hat, and I would think about all these different concepts, and I would deliver just really awesome stuff. But over and over and over again, I would see everything just kind of spin out of control really fast. Like I'd give them all this really cool stuff, then they would go and execute. They would change the logo, modify the colors. They would use it in horrific ways. They would go build a website, and the website just had none of the brand colors on it, maybe some that were approximately close. Um, and their social media would just be all over the map, right? It would be really goofy one day, really serious another day, just all over the place. It was a mess. And so I just watched this happen time and time again. Just amazing, really cool looking brand identities just going down the gutter because of just no strategic thinking. And I did not know what to do about it. I just thought, well, maybe some people just can't run their businesses properly, and that's that. But I would invest a lot of time in what I would do for people, and I'd be really proud of the work I did. But then just to see it go into the trash can of history was a really hard thing. And it wasn't until one of my business partners brought in this branding person, and she had done work with really, really large brands, and she was helping us out with one of our startups. And to be honest, we were doing some of the same things. I think because I was directly involved, I was making sure everything looked consistent. So we at least had that consistency. But I think there was something missing with the messaging, like who we were targeting, which was everybody, just like everybody does. Everybody wants to target like everybody, absolutely everybody. And when you're just first starting out, even at the higher levels, I think that's not a good strategy at all. You just don't target everybody. You have a target audience. Everybody does. I pointed this out one time to a client, and and they're doing something with a cryptocurrency. And I said, all right, well, who's your target audience? And he straight up goes, everyone. Everyone wants this. I said, okay. And I decided to just try to make a point to him. So I said, all right, well, I'm thinking of the design since it appeals to everybody. Everybody likes quilts. So I'm thinking of making the website look like a quilt, and you click on the different quilt patches. They look embroidered and you'll be able to. And then he goes, no, 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 no. He says, all the people that are going to be using it, they're gamers, man. They're like 20-something-year-old male gamers. They're not going to want a quilt. And so I was like, there it is. And so, uh, yeah, he didn't like the quilt idea, but very quickly he knew who they were targeting, who the primary audience was, and so that was the start of really starting to uncover who it is we were trying to go after. So anyway, that a lot of these different things over the years have just kind of led up to, and I could share a billion more stories, and I will, and as we go on in the future, but we get to this point of brand personality archetypes. This was one of the very first things that we did with this branding person that I mentioned before, and she took us through this concept, and I frankly had never heard of it before. Brand personality archetypes. I'd heard of personality archetypes before. I thought it sounded familiar, and it comes from Carl Jung. And I think if anyone studied marketing in school or in general, you know who Carl Jung is. And he made some really fascinating discoveries that are a really large part of a lot of things that you do in marketing to try to appeal to these common archetypes. And I just got two quotes from him that I want to share. He goes, there are forms or images of a collective nature which occur practically all over the earth, which is really fascinating, right? As constituents of myths and at the same time as individual products of unconsciousness. And he says these archetypes are imprinted and hardwired into our psyches. That's really interesting. And symbolism, architectural symbolism, that's something I've spent quite a bit of my career studying. I went through a phase of about a decade where I was just purchasing every single book I could find on symbolism because I'm creating logos. Logos are the things I've done logos more than anything else, right? And so, uh, how do you design symbols that can resonate with people even on an unconscious level, and beyond just logos, just design in general? You look at the history of design and what some of these ancient masters did in terms of using tools like the golden ratio, phi, and all these measurements and geometry, and they absolutely wove into their artwork this underlying geometry. And so, even if you knew nothing about art, you could look at a piece of art and you'd be attracted to it. Architecture, a temple, a house of worship, government structures. You would look at these things and you would feel a sense of awe and inspiration, and you maybe wouldn't understand quite why. And so that has been the thing that for a very, very long time human beings have tried to tap into. How do you reach inside of the mind and consciousness of another person and communicate important information? Now, this has been done for thousands of years with things like I've mentioned, art and architecture and whatnot. But it's only really been, I think, in the last 100 years or so, just this last recent amount of time, that we've seen this applied to advertising and marketing specifically as a discipline and trying to unlock some of those things. I think there's still a long way to go, but personality archetypes this concept is taken from Carl Jung's work. And there are 12 personality archetypes. And I'm really bummed I can't do a screen share here with you. I apologize, but I'll just read some of them off to you. And if you look up personality archetypes, you'll see that some of the names have been changed uh, slightly. There's different variations, but they're all basically the same thing. So these 12 archetypes are: you have the rebel, the hero, the sage, the creator, the explorer, the entertainer, the caregiver, the lover, the everyman, the innocent, the ruler, and the magician. And so the question becomes, all right, that's great and all, but why would I use this and how would I use this? So, why would you use this? Good question. So, your business can have a personality. I know that sounds weird, but it makes a lot of sense. People resonate more easily with personality. Like if you come and you tell a joke, like Super Bowl commercials, every company decides to become the jester or the entertainer. That. So those are two of the names: jester, entertainer. They all become the jester or the entertainer, no matter who they are on Super Bowl Sunday. Everyone wants to do a funny commercial. And even if it's not typical of the brand, I mean, there are certain commercials that aren't necessarily funny. You'll see some serious commercials in there, maybe like Lexus or something like that. They won't go super goofy. They'll try to be inspiring or um, clever. But it is very interesting how everyone puts on this personality, and then we laugh. It gets our attention, and when people make you laugh, you feel something, right? And there's this connection. Um, Now, if your brand personality type is, let's say, the creator, and it's all about innovation, unlocking the imagination, and things like that, then that's the brand personality. So everything that you do, the way you communicate with your clients, all that will be centered around that personality archetype. And think of, and this is a little analogy that I've given people to understand this. Let's say that someone goes out on a date and they're sitting across from this individual, and they start talking. And as they're talking, their accent changes. First, it's just like an American accent, then it changes to an Australian accent, then an Indian accent, and then, maybe a Spanish accent. And you're kind of going, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden, their whole attitude changes. They go from being very soft and very caring to like very loud and boisterous and throwing all these jokes around. And then it just keeps changing. Their personality just starts flipping from one to another. You'd be like, what the heck is going on here? This is this is crazy. You probably wouldn't go on a second date with that person. You might even say, hey, I got to go to the bathroom and then take off, right? It's not going to be something dissociative identity disorder. It would seem like that, right? Um, but to the average person, that that's not going to be something that is going to be comfortable for them. It's not going to be something that it may throw them off big time. And sometimes, well, a lot of times, I see businesses doing this, and they do it in their marketing and their advertising. And maybe they got a really cool logo designed by a logo designer, but the website is completely, it's crazy, right? It's very dry and boring. It's the business all talking about themselves. And then you go to the social media, and the founder of the company, he's really political. He likes, certain and he's posting political stuff with the business stuff. And then sometimes it's very serious, sometimes it's very funny, sometimes it's very thoughtful, sometimes, and it's all over the place. And so if you're the customer and you're seeing this, you're you're going to be very confused as to what this business is all about. Are these guys funny? Are they serious? Like what's their deal? I'm having a hard time connecting because everything's changing so much. it's there's not a connection happening. You're all over the map, right? But if you were able to choose a personality type for your business and then consistently stay within that personality type with everything you do, then people are going to see that consistency and they're going to resonate with it on an unconscious level, because these personality traits we talked about, like Carl Jung said, they're hardwired into our psyches. So when you're choosing to communicate through one of these personality archetypes, you are choosing to resonate with people at a very deep level. And that part of it is absolutely fascinating. And some people, you might freak out about this. They're like, "Oh, this is like psychological, manipulation or something like that." And you can make an argument for those things. And I think there's certainly a lot of businesses, corporations, even the government that uses these things in a way that are probably not probably not very moral or ethical, and trying to coerce people into different things by playing with our unconscious. And certainly that's not what I'm advocating for. What I'm advocating for here with this is communication. We want to be able to communicate effectively. And I think as long as you're using these things properly and you're not trying to do it in a subversive way, you're honestly just trying to communicate to an audience you care about a solution you have to their problem. Then I think it can be done very effectively and ethically, and it can just create a bond between the people providing the service or product and those who need that service or product to enrich and help their lives. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do here. So that answers a little bit of the why, and also I kind of got into a little bit of the how as well. But the how is a little bit more complex, because I can go in a lot of different things. So I have a methodology that I use, that I have developed over time, and I'm constantly trying to make everything that I do better. And so basically, I have a test that I have created, and there's some of these that are available online. You can go and find some of these tests. Some are free, some are paid. I've got my own version that's tailored to the way that I like to work with clients, and that's also tailored to some of the results that I've seen. And so I'm trying to get the best results possible. So it's like a regular personality test, but it's for your business, and it asks you questions about how you want to run your business. Like, what type of experience do you want to create? How do you want people to feel? And how do you want to interact with them? And what do you think your clients expect from you? What do they want? And so it asks some of these questions, and then at the end, it I collect the answers and I put them into a spreadsheet that I created, and it crunches the numbers and it gives me it automatically sorts and ranks the personality archetypes and tells me what the primary. I always say there's a primary archetype. Now sometimes there can be a tie between the two, and I don't think I've ever seen a tie between three of them. Usually it's pretty strong in one particular direction, but if there is a tie for two, they're usually very similar archetypes. So out of these 12 archetypes, there's almost like these four groups. Um, and these four groups can be put into these can be named in these categories. You've got, so ruler, caregiver, and creator would be in the order group. This is about creating order, providing structure to the world through control, service, innovation. And then you have the freedom category, which is the innocent, the sage, and the explorer. And these are all about safety, knowledge, and freedom. This yearning for paradise, like trying to find this paradise in life. The third one is ego. These are personality archetypes that want to leave a mark on the world. So you've got the rebel, the magician, the hero, and they're all about liberation, power, and mastery. And then the final one is social. It's about connecting to others. And so you have the lover, the jester, and the citizen, or the entertainer and the everyman. So again, sometimes there's different names switched out, but you get the idea. Intimacy, pleasure, belonging. So you have order, freedom, social, and ego. These are kind of the four categories of the archetypes. So even though there's usually when you have two right next to each other, they'll be in these categories together because they they meet different uh, uh, or similar attributes, right? Um, but ultimately, you have to choose one. So I always choose a primary and say, okay, this is our primary personality archetype. And I do something that has a really fancy name, but it's fancier sounding than it is. So brand archetype synthesis. And so what I like to do is I look at the primary and then I look at the secondaries. So there could be a very strong secondary, or sometimes I have seen three-way ties between certain secondary archetypes. That's happened before. And so sometimes you'll be like 50% this one archetype and then 15% these other three. And then some of the other ones will be either zero or hardly anything. But um, so what I have to do is, all right, I got to decide what should I do with these other archetypes, because I think there's a way that we could use elements of both of these archetypes in what we're doing. So for instance, um, I had one client that scored very high in the sage category, which is all about knowledge and learning, and that was certainly a very big part of their brand. But the secondary one was the hero, which is about basically giving people power and helping them achieve things, right? And so what I did is I created this synthesis of these two, and I just called it the heroic sage. And what I did is I used the sage as the basis, but where the hero fit into some of those areas of that, of the description of the personality and all the elements that it touches, I would weave in some of those elements of the hero. So I would take the sage and make each of those a little bit more heroic, so to speak, in that particular category. And so we came up with a brand archetype that was unique, that had some of these elements. And that's where it gets really exciting, because then you're creating these synthesized archetypes that can communicate in very specific ways. So one example from the movies of like a synthesized archetype would be Princess Leia, because she is both a ruler, because she's a princess, and she's a rebel because she's going against the empire, right? And so now you have this Princess Leia character who has these complicated personality archetypes, but you resonate with her because the two main archetypes she has are valid. You know, they exist. And so um even though you're merging two of them together, you're getting all these different characters. And there's all the different kinds of characters in film. You know, look at like Captain Jack Sparrow. I mean, there's a million, right? And they can all have sometimes multiple characteristics, but you don't want to have so many that then you're going to confuse people again, right? So a primary and a secondary personality archetype. Now that doesn't always work. Now sometimes um, I would say that this should only be done if it makes sense to do it. And how do you know? Well, one of the things that I do in my branding process, it's actually one of the first things I do before we dig down to any of this and make any decisions here, is I conduct interviews with some of the people that are representative of the target audience that we're going after. That's very important, because once we've done those interviews, we have a better idea of who exactly we're going after and what personality archetype is really going to resonate with them. So now we begin to understand them a little bit more, have a conversation with them, talk to them, talk about what brands they like and that really resonate with them and why. Then when we're trying to decide, we have the primary archetype, and first thing we got to ask ourselves is, will this primary archetype fit with them? Did sometimes the founder of the company, they have these ideas of how they want their company to be and what they want their company to how they want it to behave, and what type of personality they may want it to have. They may have some ideas in their minds. Usually people try to create their business in their own image, and and a lot of what they want in the logo and the look and feel and the design is what they want as a person. But the problem with that is they are not the target audience, right? They're building this business for someone else. One of my clients uh, is made up of two males, two females, and they had a product that they were marketing, and it turns out the product ended up being very feminine. But the men looked at all these YouTube channels and stuff, and they saw a very masculine version of the product. They had something like that in mind. They felt like they wanted to see something more masculine. The women, however, they had, I feel like, a much better handle on who the client actually was from their experience out working with the client, the prospects they were dealing with. And an image was painted. They started to tell me who they thought these people were and who this product would fit with the best. And there was an opportunity there to go after this audience that they actually had really no other competition in, because all their competition was very masculine. And so they were going after a very different audience, and they had a unique position to where they were physically located and other businesses around them to where they could easily go after very successfully this particular demographic. So when I showed the branding, the brand identity, and everything for the first time, the men were a little shocked. They didn't expect it. But then when I took them through the process and I explained everything and showed it to them, that's when the light went on in their head. And they were like, "Oh my gosh, that's where the opportunity lies. This is perfect. This is exactly what we should be doing." So what it did is you had these four people, two people were looking in a different direction and two people were looking in a different direction. And if they were trying to run their business this way, all their stuff would have been this pull between these two different ways of looking at things. But we got everybody on the same page, and now they have a common vision and they know exactly what they're doing. That alone is so incredibly valuable, especially when you have multiple people that are working on the project together. Now, you may say, well, I'm a solopreneur, I'm running my business all by myself, and I'll keep it consistent because it's just me. Well, the thing is, even even if your business is just one person, what ends up happening, and this is something I've seen too, you may have even done it yourself, is you're running your business, you're trying to be effective, and you're just trying to appeal to everyone, and sometimes you're being really generic, or you are going after a really strong personality, but you did no research. You don't know if that's what your target audience is wanting, and it doesn't seem like they want it because your business isn't doing very well. And so you'll be watching YouTube videos, you'll be seeing other businesses come up in the news. You'll say, "Oh, look what Elon Musk is doing. Oh, look what this company or that company is doing," and then you'll try to change everything. So I want to be like that company, and you just start imitating other companies just because they're successful, but you're not talking to your target audience. You're not conducting interviews. You're not getting to really know these people and figuring out how to connect and resonate with them. And you may be jumping from one bad idea to a worse idea, right? And still not seeing the results. So like, man, I can't believe it. I rebuilt my whole website so it looks like the Tesla website. I've literally worked with clients who just said, "Make my website look exactly like this other website." And then they got into trademark problems. Had to go change everything. Yeah, you don't want to just directly rip people off. Just because someone else is having success, it doesn't mean you will have the same success if you do the exact same things. I mean, it almost never happens. Um, it's far more likely that somebody's going to go with you because they feel that there's something different about you. And that's the thing. I think a lot of people are under the assumption that it's really hard to be original and it's really hard to be different because there's so much competition out there. But let me tell you that it is absolutely possible. And I could have 10 clients that are all in the exact same industry and run them through my process and generate 10 completely different offerings, 10 different personalities, 10 different approaches to the same issue. And all 10 of those companies can exist in harmony right alongside one another, each taking their slice of the market share. Now, some are going to be more successful and some are going to be less successful. But on a case by case basis, you're going to be able to find out how to take one of those businesses and have them appeal to a segment of that market, a niche within that market, and do it in a way that's original, that feels very unique and targeted towards that audience. Now, you go to a grocery store, and there isn't just one type of milk, there isn't one type of egg, there isn't one type of beans. There's many options. And some of those products are almost exactly the same thing. They just have a different label. And people will buy one just because of the label, even just the look of it, maybe even the color. One's got a blue label, one's got a green label. And more people like blue. So they're going to pick the blue one. And then there's a small segment of people that are like, well, you know what? I really like green because it reminds me of the environment, and I like environmental stuff, and so this seems more organic, even though it's not, but it's green, and so I'm going to buy it. That's just going to be my choice, my preference, and so yeah, it's really fascinating how we make decisions. But when we go to the store, we have all of these options. There's plenty of room for variations. Uh, Sometimes people really like options. If you don't like options, you'll go to In and Out, where they have basically just a couple. They got that secret menu and everything, but on the main menu, there's just a couple different hamburger options, and that's it. It's very simple. You don't have to think a lot. Now, if you go to Cheesecake Factory, then you got to open up their Cheesecake Factory Bible, and there's a million different things you could possibly eat in there. Which that's a good place to go if you got a group of people, together, and you're not sure what everybody likes. Because yeah, if you got a big group and you're going In and Out, there might be people that don't eat meat, or they don't like hamburgers, or they're on a diet, or they're gluten intolerant or whatever, and so you're running issues there. But you go to Cheesecake Factory, you're gonna have plenty of options, but you'll also probably take forever to order, just going through everything, get into analysis paralysis, right? So yeah, you can give people options, and the whole point of implementing some of these brand architectures and things is to help people make decisions faster by appealing to things that they already like and they already resonate with: personality, even the design, the way everything looks, the identity, the logo to some degree. The logo can I already did episode recently on, I think it was just the last one on logos, and just talking about how the logo can be really important in some cases and not as important in other cases. But the brand identity, I believe, is more important than the logo. The overall look and feel of the brand and the design of things. But that design is only going to be effective if it's built on the foundation of a strategy that informs what the design should look like. Just a pretty design alone isn't going to get you there. Now, sometimes it's like, I say every squirrel finds a nut, right? And so sometimes people get lucky. They just happen to be very, maybe charismatic, or they stumble into something that just resonates with people. But that's luck. That's not a strategy. And there's a lot of stories of people finding great success just through sheer luck and opportunity. And it happens, but you can't replicate that. You can't replicate luck. Um, but you can replicate a strategic branding concept, and you can do things deliberately that are going to help you get there. So brand personality archetypes are just one set of tools in the whole bag. So there's actually a whole tool set that I have that I bring to the table when I do these things. But how can you use brand personality archetypes right now? It's fairly simple. If you just do a Google search, there's a million different websites out there that have information about this topic. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that if you want to pick this up and run with it, just as is, just picking a personality archetype and running with it, it may solve the problem a little bit. But again, the one thing I would have to warn you about is if you just simply pick the archetype that you want without considering what you think is going to resonate with a specific target audience. And when I talk about a specific target audience, I'm talking about who needs your product or service the most, who would benefit from it the most, what segment of your audience, what segment of your audience is going to pay you the most for that solution, and consider those types of things. And the third one I would say is who do you want to work with? Because there may be a huge audience of people and you may be getting them as clients right now. I've got one of my clients where 60% of his clients are not the people that he wants to be working with. And I said, well, then why do you work with them? He goes, well, they're just there. They appear. And so when I looked at his overall messaging right on his website, we serve all people. And I said, well, who would you like to have as your clients? Well, I would like to have people at this age range who are experiencing this from this. And I said, well, why don't you say that? He's like, I don't know. So that's one of the biggest things I see is I go to people's websites and I'm on the phone with them or a Zoom call or whatever. We're looking at their website and they're like, here's my website. And they start telling me all about their business, and they're like, this is what we're doing. And what they're telling me is so compelling. And I'm like, wow, that's powerful. And I said, why isn't that line you just told me, why isn't that on your website everywhere? Why is your website like the opposite of what you're saying? And they just kind of pause for a minute. Like, I don't know. See, if there isn't any underlying strategy, this is what happens, right? People will go out and fight battles in marketing with one or both hands tied behind their back. They keep their best arguments hidden, like the passion they have and what they're talking about. And many people they are building a solution to a problem because they're passionate about it and they know the problem exists, but then they build a website that's so lame. It doesn't have any personality. It's not communicating these things. So you got to be careful with this stuff. The applying the personality archetypes should be done very carefully. It should be done in consideration of the target audience and what you feel will resonate with them. And it should be done in a way that really resonates with the problem that you're trying to solve. Now, sometimes you can subvert things a little bit. Like you don't, I mean, I think back in the day, I remember growing up in the 80s seeing insurance company commercials, and most of them were very dry and boring. They showed people living their lives and like protect your family and protect your home and blah, blah, blah. They were very um, conservative in that way. And then all of a sudden they started to become more comical. I mean, you think of Geico and the little lizard, and uh, got Liberty Mutual with that weird guy in the emu. And yeah, everyone's kind of jumping on the bandwagon. Aflac with the duck. So some of these insurance companies decided to adopt the jester personality archetype and try to use that to just get attention and try to appeal to an audience. And it worked really, really well. You wouldn't think that being goofy like that, Flow with progressive. Yeah. I know somebody who reminds me of Flo. Um, I guess I'm the only one who thinks they remind me of Flo, but I find it hilarious. I always see this person when I see Flo. She even sounds like her, I think. I don't know if that's a compliment or insulting, but um, we'll see. But yeah, so they've latched on to these, Old Spice, absolutely jester, right? You expect to see something really weird, goofball. Um, Skittles, but that doesn't mean that everything needs to be funny all the time. Dove is a good example of like the caregiver. So I'll give you some examples here. So, um, and some of these will be maybe slightly, I don't want to say controversial, but some might disagree with the application of some of these. It depends on how you're looking at it, but I think we'd all agree Harley Davidson motorcycles, they have adopted the rebel persona. You can see it in their advertising, um, in everything they do. It makes sense. Jeep would be the explorer, Chanel, the lover, Apple, the creator. I've seen Apple even uses a magician as well. Google, the sage. When anyone wants knowledge, Google it, right? It's personally, I don't use Google. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not a huge fan. Pampers would be in the caregiver section. Nestle would be like the innocent, and Dollar Shave Club is another example of the jester. Disney, they're using Disney as the magician in this example. Rolex would be the ruler. Nike, the hero, and Gap would be an example of like the everyman, the regular guy, the citizen, sometimes it's called. And so those are just a couple examples. There's many, many more. One of the experiments you might want to try to do is when you're watching commercials or you're just seeing any type of advertising, ask yourself, what personality archetype is this? Now you can look up 12 personality archetypes online and you'll usually find a wheel with all the archetypes on it. And you can save that to your phone and pull it up every now and then and do a little experiment. Look around and see if anybody, um, if if you can identify the personality archetype that the brands are using. I guarantee you all of the major companies are using this. Big giant corporations, they're all using this because it works. And we see that it works. If you've ever told somebody about a commercial that you saw, um, you'll we know this kind of instinctively. It's already been working on us. And so that's something to try to experiment with. If you're going to implement this in your business, like I said before, I would do some research. I would conduct some interviews with your target audience, and you can ask them questions such as what type of brands resonate with you in this category. If you're, let's say you're a construction company or an insurance company, or um, I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head. Let's say you're a pediatric dentist, and you say, all right, what other dental practices have you resonated with, and why? Like, why did you like one over the other? What in Some people might say, well, the staff was friendly, or I knew the dentist who was my neighbor, or something like that. But what you're really trying to get into is the types of, if it's a a question of brand personality. It's like, well, when I went into their office, everything was really colorful and playful. Some people, though, you might be surprised, they may not like that. They're like, a lot of these dental practices I go into, they look like a circus, and I just want to take my kid to a nice, clean place that looks like they're serious because I'm paying a lot of money. And if they look like it's a circus, that may, I don't know, really like that. So other people are the complete opposite. They're like, my kid is afraid of like the medical, feel. But if he walks into a place that's full of color and life and looks exciting, he doesn't think so much about um, the dental pain. It distracts from that. And so yeah, that's kind of how you conduct some of that research. You just ask some questions, and then if your brand is all about entertaining, what types of brands do you find the most entertaining? And why? If your brand is more about knowledge and education, what other brands would you classify as falling into the category of knowledge and entertaining, or knowledge and education that resonate with you? Maybe someone's a big fan of Khan Academy, and doing those types of things, or some other online curriculum, or um, a set of courses, and master class. There's all kinds of things out there, and so you ask people what currently resonates with you. Why does it resonate with you? Um, and you gather that information from. I do with at least. Oh, comment error 4 code. I'm not sure what that is. Hopefully. Oh, my video stopped. Oh, well, it seems to still be going here, so I'm going to keep going. Maybe try refresh. There we go. So anyway, where was I? So anyway, yeah, do some of that research. I mean, I will ask different questions. I have different conversations with the audience, depending on the client I'm working with, depending on the brand. A lot of what I do is custom tailored to each individual group. But generally speaking, you can do some of this research yourself. You can select the personality archetype that works for you, and then you can write up your own statement that this is our personality archetype. This is how we're going to communicate with our audience, and we're going to do this consistently. If any communications with our client are go against anything here in this personality archetype, that is off brand, and we will not do that, because it'll work against us. We'll be confusing our audience. And so that's basically how you would use this in the future. So I put everything as part of a comprehensive brand architecture that includes a ton of other stuff, not just the personality archetype. But this one segment of the plan is very, very important. And it's a way for you to connect with people on an unconscious level and start to see some changes in who is becoming more attracted to your business as you're going forward, and getting more of the clients that you want to get, because you're now speaking to them in a way that they like. Does that make sense? So if somebody is trying to attract somebody on a date, and they're in a part of the country where being a being more of a cowboy is really attractive to the types of people they're trying to attract, then you'll dress like a cowboy and you'll adopt the cowboy persona, or the surfer persona, or like the thug persona, or whatever. You can adopt these different personality traits where you're at to resonate with the culture that you're in. And some people do that unconsciously. I remember everyone in elementary school seems like they're mostly the same. Like everybody dresses the same, everybody looks the same. As soon as people hit middle school, high school, that's when goths, surfers, cowboys, jocks, like all these different subcultures begin to manifest themselves. In my high school, we had a group of people that actually believed they were vampires. They dressed like vampires, and they would go around acting like vampires. So Uh, that was weird, but yeah. So it is kind of funny how we naturally do that. How people will naturally try to settle into some type of personality archetype one way or another. And each of those things, you can find those on the wheel. Like people that maybe they're dressing more gangster or thug, they're in the rebel category. People that maybe are the surfer, they're possibly in the explorer, or the jock is maybe the hero. Some of the kids that are just just dressed normal t-shirt and jeans, they're just the everyman. And so it's kind of funny how we naturally self-select into these personality archetypes. No matter what they are, I guarantee you they're going to find some type of representation within these. And even as we get transition into adults, we're still in many ways wired into one of these personality archetypes that we've adopted ourselves into. And I've seen people change it. I've known people that have gone through midlife crises where they were very much just kind of a beach bum mentality, and then they turned into like cowboy kind of mentality. This is changed the way they dress, even changed the way they talk, and the speech patterns they use. So these personality archetypes, they can be somewhat fluid and whatnot. But anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here with some of these things. But the main point here is that personality is a part of our daily lives, and more than that, it becomes a part of who we are as people. We know people by their personalities. And sometimes when you mention someone's name, they may they may kind of look at you, and you both have a feeling of reverence towards that person because they may be a caregiver and they're just such a good, nice person. Some people, they're very funny, and some people, they you admire them because they've achieved so much. And it's kind of interesting. Think about every person you know in your life and what personality archetype do they represent? Think of your spouse, your kids, even the people around you. Uh, I think if you think about it long enough, you'll be able to put different people into different personality archetypes. So yes, you can do it with a business. The main point is it makes the business itself more relatable to people. Why not be more relatable to people than less relatable to people? And this is one way that you do it. And you don't want to have this multiple personality disorder with your business because you're going to confuse people and even push people away. The worst of all, I think, is when somebody looks at your offering and it would be perfect for them, but they look at how you're simply marketing it and talking about it and they go, "Ooh, that's not for me. That must be for someone else." And then they move on. And I think that's tragic because we want to be able to connect people that have problems with good solutions that are going to enrich their quality of life. And sometimes we can get in our own way of doing that. And so again, this is just one tool for helping you get out of your own way and communicating more effectively. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off the conversation. So I've got it looks like our one viewer, Lauren, she's back. So Lauren, I'm going to open this up to you for questions. So we're going to have a little Q&A, and yeah, we'll just cover a couple of questions, see if we have some answers for you. But is there anything else you'd like to ask? Any questions you have, Lauren, about what we've discussed so far? And honestly, it could be completely off topic. If you have a general branding question as well, then we can go ahead and discuss that. But yeah, let's spend a couple minutes going over some questions if you'd like to do that. Hopefully, Lauren can hear. She said she's back. All right. Okay. While she's thinking, let me see some final thoughts on this. As far as resources go, where you can learn about some of these things. I mean, first off, I recommend reading some of Carl Jung's work, just getting your hands on anything related to Carl Jung and learning a lot more about what he discovered in terms of these personality archetypes. That would be a good start because then you'll understand some of the basis of it. Now, can you go on to other different websites and blogs that'll give you a breakdown, or their YouTube videos? Yeah, I mean, there's literally so much stuff. I don't know that I could point you to anything specific because there's so many good things. You'll just stumble across it, as you're out there searching. So just look up Jung, Jung, personality archetypes. And I would throw the word brand in there too. Brand, Jung brand personality archetypes. Just search that and you're going to find a wealth of information. And I think it's really helpful to look at different people and how they understand these archetypes and how they use them, because there's so many creative ways of doing it. And some people emphasize more parts of the equation than others. And that gets pretty interesting. But in looking around, find something that resonates with you, that makes sense to you, just in the way that people are explaining it. And I think that you'll find some really good information out there. So Lauren, she's asking, Geico has gone through so many different marketing campaigns. How have they been able to maintain a consistent personality through all of these shifts of messenger with the same message? That's a good question. I think over time, you'll see businesses rebrand. The key here, I think the most important thing is understanding who your audience is. Sometimes the audience will change, or sometimes the business will want to go after a different audience. And when that happens, there'll be a change to the brand personality and the messaging. Now, this can sometimes be a massive failure. We've seen this recently with some companies where they decide to do something very different with their branding, and it ends up turning off the audience and turns into boycotts and things like that, and people get very, very upset. um that's unfortunate, but you know sometimes I don't totally understand why people make the decisions that they do. Some people, I think, make decisions for very bad reasons, political reasons or things like that, and they bring politics into the table where it doesn't belong, or it's very awkward, and it just at a visceral level turns people off. They just they didn't have that association with the brand before. Every One of my favorite definitions of a brand is that it's from Uli Applebaum. I just keep going back to his. He says a brand is a sum total of all the associations that people have about your offering. Paraphrasing a little bit, but that's hopefully that makes sense. So when you think McDonald's, you think golden arches, cheap food, um, ice cream machines that never work, clown. There's things that come to mind. Fast. Some people, they have like a favorite hamburger they go get at McDonald's, like their thing, their go-to thing. Happy Meals, things like that. So the brand exists in the hearts and minds of the people, and it consists of all these associations. And whenever we want to feel those associations or resonate with them or have those specific connections of feelings, we go and we interact with that brand to get those things. That's why you'll have a craving for a certain type of food, right? Let's say you have a pizza craving and there's a pizza place you like. And so the associations are sauce, that distinct flavor, that distinct smell, like all these things. Those were created by the brand, but some of them intentionally, some of them unintentionally. Like I know I think Pepsi, they've done a lot of research on, I think Coke as well, about the sound the cans make when you open them, the psh, that little sound. I know that BMW, they specifically engineer the doors on their car to when they close, they make a specific sound and there's a specific feel. They do that intentionally. So Consistency is important as long as it's serving your purpose. It's not inconsistent to do a brand refresh. Sometimes you have to in order for the company to survive. You've been around for years and years. You've been serving the same type of customer, and that type of customer, maybe they're getting older, and the stuff you're doing isn't resonating with them anymore. And I mean, there could be a million different reasons, but you're always polling your customers. You're always have your finger on the pulse of your customers. Is what you're doing continuing to resonate? And sometimes maybe you made some bad choices in how you built your brand and it's not working and you need to change it, or the audience underneath you changes. It can happen, right? There's a lot of reasons why. It could be that you got another company because it's I can't remember who it started with, who kicked off being funny in the insurance industry. Maybe it was either Geico or Aflac, or it could have been another smaller company. And so then everybody started doing it. And then now, in order to survive, that people expect that now. So now brands have to shift and figure out how they could play in the same arena, but in their own way that's unique, if that makes sense. So there's a number of factors, but you really have to be paying attention to your audience and connecting with your audience. If you lose connection with your audience, then you're going to lose control of your brand, and you'll see it in your sales and just generally speaking, how your business is performing, if that makes sense. Yeah, Aflac with the goose. Was it a goose or a duck? I think it's like a goose, right? I mean, sometimes sometimes I get them confused. Sometimes these big, white ducks, they look like geese. I'm not a biologist. So I think it was a goose, right? Or no, I'll have to look it up. Yeah. We'll call the Aflac bird a goose. It was a duck. Okay, cool. Yeah, all of a sudden I'm thinking in my mind, I thought it was a duck, but all right. Well, we'll go with Lauren here. She says it's a duck. I guess it's a duck. So if it's not, then probably all my comments on this video about brand personality archetypes are going to be about the Aflac fowl. So probably, yeah, I'll have to go research it. I just don't know off the top of my head. It's never been a big part of my life to know what type of animal the Aflac bird is. But okay, you got any other questions? Does that answer your question about how they've been able to maintain that consistency? A former BYU teacher selected some of former students to help build his business. Yeah. Okay. Cool. She's typing up a story. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get to this last question and then probably cut it off from there. We're about an hour and 3 minutes in. It's a little bit longer than I was thinking of being on, but I kind of plan on about an hour. So yeah, that's good. Yeah, if this ends up being a good format, I'm gonna try to find a way to do a screen share. I would have thought that they would have this built in. YouTube would have this built in. Like if you're gonna have a tool like this, that people would be sharing their screens, but no, they don't have that feature. So unfortunate. All right, but yeah, it is really fascinating with no. You can go ahead and ask your question. Go for it. That's fine. We can cover one more thing. Yeah, go for it. Don't worry about it being tardy. There's no rules here. There's no I didn't come out with any preconceived ideas of when I was going to cut off. I figured I was going to go about an hour, but hey, as long as the topic of discussion is interesting and we have some valuable things to discuss, then yeah, let's talk about them. Let's add a little bit more to this. So, um, but I'm going to try to see what else I could do if this is a good format to improve this in the future. So I know there's other software I could use. There was some software I was using before that I think could work well, but we'll find out. So, well, yeah. Typically, the things that I start out with when I'm approaching building a brand or helping like a new business find out what exactly they're going to do. The first two things I look at are number one, what problem are you trying to solve? It's very simple in concept, but a lot of people don't really understand the problem they're trying to solve. Sometimes people build a solution and then they go looking for a problem to solve with the solution. And it can sometimes be difficult to do that. It's much better to a uh, find an existing problem and then build a solution around that problem. And and it's hard because a lot of times we build businesses out of a passion for something and we're thinking about solving a problem that we have and assuming that there's enough people experiencing the same problem that they will pay what we want for our solution. And that is not always true. Sometimes it is, a lot of times it isn't. So, how do you tell? Well, I will typically do something called a riskiest assumption test or RAT. And what you want to ask yourself is what is the riskiest assumption I am making in this endeavor, in this business endeavor? So I had a client, he came to me and he goes, I want to sell this product. I think it would be really cool. I think people would buy it. And we started talking about it and everything. And I just couldn't get past the thought that this guy was going to be spending a lot of money with me building something that would likely not work for him. And I don't like doing that. I don't like taking people's money and delivering them something that doesn't return on their investment. And I don't have total control of that, but I do have some control of that. I can walk into a situation knowing that there's there's not really a foundation or a shady foundation and we need to validate it. So that's why we do a riskiest assumption test. And so I asked him the question. I was like, what do you think is the riskiest assumption that you're making with your business right now? Like with this concept, what's the riskiest assumption? And so we worked through it together and he found out that, well, it would be that somebody would buy this product that I'm selling over all these others that exist. And it was mainly a question of this generic version versus a more expensive, sometimes 2 to 3 times more expensive, custom, unique version. And so I said, well, how can you validate that assumption? What do you think we could do? And so I gave him some ideas, and he decided to go with the survey concept. So just did Google Forms and put it out in a survey, sent it out to as many people as he could, saying, here's the scenario. Would you buy this item for your kid? Yes. Okay. What would you expect to pay for this item? This much. Okay. If you had the choice between a generic version of this item and a more customized, higher end version of this item, which would you buy and why? And he did this research, and it turns out that, and you can put little images in Google Forms. So I suggest put some pictures in there of your version and their version, asking which one they buy and which one they would pay for, which one they wouldn't pay for. So he did all that, and turns out it was really a bust. Nobody was interested, hardly anyone. It wouldn't have worked. So basically thanked me and said, "Hey, you just saved me thousands of dollars, lots of my time." And so, uh, anyway, it was a good move. So that one didn't succeed. But a couple months later, the same client comes back to me and says, "I've done some testing. I have a better product." Told me about his idea. I said, "There you go." And he had proof to back it up. And we had a good solid foundation to go on, and came back and we did that project together. So that's an example of how you can validate those assumptions as you go forward. So Lauren says, we help with branding, research, and financials. We're a 1099 employee until startup, but we're currently not getting paid. We have a 1099 contract, blah, blah. $18 for the 10K bonus. Is that even legal? I don't know. You'll have to talk to an attorney about that. The legal aspect of things in this context, that's not my specialty. I want to continue to help, but I have too much on my plate already. I'm sure he's probably giving us opportunity to learn about entrepreneurship and the world works, but I don't know. $18 an hour. I mean, $18 an hour. It depends on what you're doing. For branding and things, I mean, I don't charge I don't charge that much, but I guess it depends on how much experience you have and how much value and knowledge you have that you're bringing to the table. But if it's a learning process, if you have the opportunity and you're just getting started, and knowledge is part of the payment as well, you can't necessarily look at it. Depends on what you need more. Do you need the knowledge or do you need the money? And I think most of us would say, well, I need both. It's like, okay, but how much more valuable is the knowledge in this case than the money? I mean, is the knowledge really, really good? I mean, is this guy like a pro and just listening and working with the this individual? Is it going to make you more money in the future because of his knowledge and talents, or um, is he just trying to find cheap labor? And you know, if the individual's legit, if they know their stuff and it would be very wise to work with them, then it might be a good idea to try that for a while. You know, you may not make a ton of money, but if you get the knowledge that will help you make more money in the future, then that would be a wise investment. But yeah, if he's just kind of someone who says they, you know, they have this knowledge or whatever, um and there's not going to be much to gain. Like you could essentially learn from this person the same you would learn from just going and watching some YouTube videos or whatever, and then that might not be the best thing to do. And plus, I mean, I think if you do need the money and you need money to survive on, and that's all that they're offering, I mean, you're if that's not enough to survive on, then you're looking at maybe like taking a second job. That's something you're really going to have to ask yourself. There's too many factors there to where I could give you advice. I mean, the only thing I could really advise you on is if always trying to start up a Corp B. Um, okay, I believe him in his vision. I mean, it may be worthwhile. You might want to see if it's something you can just dip your toes in. If it's not that big of a commitment, it's something you can just try out and see if there's any value. I mean, I've been a part of many different businesses, startups, and some have seemed to have been a massive waste of time. But I've learned from everything I've done. Everything I've done in my career, I've learned from, even if it's been a total disaster. I've learned from it. So I think the only way anything you participate in is going to be a real waste of time is if you don't learn anything from the experience, if that makes sense. But yeah, you got to give weight to what's important to you and what you're hoping to get out of it. And I would only participate in something if, I mean, I try to make anything I participate in worthwhile. I try to, minimize my risk as much as possible, make the best decision I can. But worst case scenario, I'm at least going to learn something from it. if that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I hope that's reasonable advice. Yeah, again, I would talk to several people that whose opinions you trust. Let them know about the situation and just put it out there and see what people say. And if the majority of people that you trust seem to suggest that, hey, yeah, this could be a good idea, then that may be something you want to try. But sometimes people will see the red flags that you don't see, and this is because, and this is a problem with branding and a lot of other things. When we're too close to something, we we don't see the flaws and the red flags. It's because it's kind of like it becomes our baby. And it's like I say, nobody wants to be told they have an ugly baby. They don't accept it. Everybody thinks their baby's the cutest baby in the world. And it's not true. My babies are the cutest babies. Yeah, but it's that bias in there, right? And we all have this bias inside that can affect how we see things, and it can be very dangerous. We can walk into really bad situations because we aren't seeing the red flags. Even in my own business with what I'm doing and everything that I know, it's very hard for me because I know the pitfalls and I know the traps, but that bias is so strong that I need an outside eye to just make sure what I'm doing is resonating and on the right track. So even I need an outside eye. And my whole career is basically being that outside eye to other businesses where I could come in with fresh eyes and see things. And so I think it's always a good idea if you're making important decisions to invite the unbiased. I mean, nobody's unbiased, but just disinterested third parties, I guess maybe that have less of a bias as you, so that they can point out and see red flags that you may be blind to because you're too close to it. If that makes sense. So, all right, I think we covered everything. Thank you, Lauren, for joining this live stream. So, hopefully, if end up doing something like this in the future, we can, yeah, get more people on here and have some really cool discussions about some of these topics. But this was fun to do and to try. And yeah, thanks for being on and asking some of those questions. I think there's some valuable stuff in there that could be of use to others. So hey, appreciate you joining me on this first edition of a live Brand or Die episode. So I don't know if I'll do more of these in the future. I think maybe I will. It's kind of fun. I think there may be a place to do some of these. So I'll have to get some more feedback. If you enjoyed this format and you didn't happen to catch it live and would like to see more in the future, just leave something in the comments. If you like what we discussed today and you want to hear more of this, subscribe, like the video, all that other stuff that you have to do. It sounds kind of annoying saying all that, but yeah, it's important. It basically tells me that you're getting value out of this, and if people are getting value out of this, yeah, I'll continue to do it. And so I always think it's good to add to the conversation and put stuff out there. And I want to keep improving this channel and the content and put stuff out there that is useful to individuals. So the things I talk about, certainly they're useful to people that do branding, but the main audience that I'm trying to reach with this content are people in startups, businesses, people that need this information, and every business needs this information. I'm absolutely convinced of that. Every single business, no matter who you are, what you are, can absolutely benefit dramatically from this. It could turn, it could flip the business. Everything you're doing right now, it could go from being horrible to awesome in the blink of an eye. Now, there are many reasons why a business isn't doing well. This is one of the big ones. If you're not doing this, there's a quote from Steve Forbes. He said that branding is the most important investment that you can make in your business is branding. And so I latched onto that quote because I believe it's actually true. I didn't just one day wake up and say, I'm going to make branding my thing. The reason I focused my entire business on branding. I used to build tons of websites, tons of logos. My old website used to say websites, logos, things like that. I have switched completely over to brand architecture because it must be in place. I will not design websites or logos unless there is a brand architecture of some kind, some type of brand strategy in place because it's that important. I think it's a waste of money a lot of times, not in every single occasion, especially if it, like in my last logo video, I explained there are certain cases where the logo really doesn't matter very much because if you're dealing one on one with people and they know you by name and they're basically buying you, then it doesn't matter as much. Um, so the weight that we place on certain things, it is situational depending on what you're doing, right? But overall, having a brand strategy in place is one of the smartest things you can do. It is an important investment. It's worth your time, absolutely. And you know what? If you started your business and you went down a path and you're like, well, I don't have any of that right now. I I wasn't even thinking of any of that when I ran my business, and now I don't know if I'm suffering from some of these things, but I feel like my sales are in decline. I'm not really resonating. I'm getting beat by my competition. Nobody notices my business. Then you would benefit from these things because all the things we're discussing are about standing out in the marketplace as a distinct option and for a niche, the only option, the superior option. That doesn't mean you have to be the biggest company. It just means you have to be the company that resonates the most with the audience. And sometimes that's not the biggest company. Sometimes people don't want to buy the big brands. They want to buy something that feels like it's new, it's fresh, it's from a small group that cares about the quality, that cares about the things you care about specifically. You're going to win those customers over the big guys every time because you're appealing to the things that they want and you're appealing to their own personality type on an unconscious level. Does that make sense? And so, yeah, it's really cool stuff. It's worth doing, and I'm just gonna keep talking if I don't stop right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off. Hey, thanks for joining me today. And if whether you are Lauren, my audience of one, or if you're listening to this again in the future, thank you very much for sticking around and listening to the whole thing. And I look forward to talking to you again on the next exciting episode of Brand or Die.